As Matt just mentioned, we have a breaking news story to tell you about. Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center here in New York City. It happened just a few moments ago, apparently. We have very little information available at this point in time. But on the phone, we do have Jennifer Oberstein, who apparently witnessed this event. Jennifer, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, can you please tell me what you saw and to give me any information about what's going on there?
Yes, I have to tell you, it's quite terrifying. I'm in shock right now. I came out of the subway at Bowling Green. I was heading to work in Battery Park at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I come out, and I heard a boom, looked up, and there was a big ball of fire. I'm now looking north at the World Trade Center, and it is the left twin tower if I'm looking north. I'm in Battery Park right now, and you can hear the fire engines and the emergency crews behind me, and it is unbelievable. When the fire first burst, it was a... Hello?
Go ahead. We can hear you.
In air like I've never seen before. And as you know, I used to work in news. I've never seen any fire like this in the air, and the pieces of the building were flying down. It looks like it's like the top, I can't even tell you, maybe 20 floors. Intense smoke. It's horrible. I can't even describe it to you.
Do you have any idea what kind of plane it was?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any idea what hit the World Trade Center?
What it was?
Yeah, what kind of plane? We're getting reports that an airplane hit the building.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Honestly, I was walking up, and it looked up and saw a big boom and fire. You know, I got to tell you, we were all saying around here that it was very interesting that it would be a bomb and it would be so high up. So perhaps it was a plane. We have no talk of a plane. However, I have to tell you, there are still things flying in the air. I mean, it's mind-boggling, and it's horrifying.
Jennifer, it's Matt Lauer. I'd like to ask you, while you were close to the building, or have you, since the explosion, seen anyone who's been injured being taken out of the building? Are there ambulances dealing with people on the sidewalk around the building? No,
I have not. I have not gotten that close. I have to tell you that my father works in the World Financial Center, and I first called over there to see, because it's next door, to see, you know, if he was okay. I couldn't get through, and I'm far away right now. I thought it might be a little dangerous to get too close. I saw lots of debris coming down, and right now I'm in Battery Park. I don't know, you know, it's probably a 5-minute walk from here to the World Trade Center, but the smoke is incredible. I mean, I can't see the top of the tower. It's starting to cover the top of the second tower.
In fact, we're looking at pictures right now, Jennifer, with a huge gaping hole on the side of the building and billowing smoke. So
I'm right now, you see, yeah, I see major fire. I definitely see fire.
And Jennifer, you said you're looking north at the building, so in other words, you're south of the building,
yes,
is that right?
Correct.
Because we're looking at a picture that is looking at the north side of the building.
I'm on the exact opposite side.
And it appears that is where the largest hole is. And again, as you mentioned correctly, toward the top of the building, but on the north side, and then on the, what I think is the west side of the building, we can also see some holes there that could have been from damage once the impact occurred. Again, we've been told that this is a plane. We don't have confirmation on that, but there is an enormous hole in the north side of that building.
Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit more about what you heard when you heard this explosion? Describe it for us.
Absolutely. When I walked out of the subway, I looked at the Twin Towers because, I mean, I just always look up there. And right when I looked up, there was a boom. It wasn't that loud. Like, it wasn't huge. However, what was unbelievable was the amount of fire. It was a big ball of fire that just went up. And I looked around at people. We were all horrified. I'm stuttering because I'm in such shock. I've never seen anything like it. It's just horrible.
And of course, this is real cause for concern because the World Trade Center is one of the busiest office buildings here in New York, with hundreds, perhaps thousands of workers
New
who...
York State Governor has his office, New York City office there.
Several thousand
and of
workers.
course, given the time that this has happened, it's only probably appropriate to surmise that people might have been in the building.
And you know, we've seen stories in the past where planes have hit buildings, small planes, and it would be hard to imagine that a small plane could create that kind of hole in a building like the World Trade Center and create the damage on the other side of the building from the sheer impact. Small Small planes tend to crumple and then fall down the building. Again, we haven't talked to anyone who's close to the base of the building, so we don't know what kind of debris or wreckage. Yes, go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm sorry. I'm just talking to a police officer right here, and he says, yes, he heard it was a plane.
Does he have any information about what kind of plane it was, or can he tell us any more details?
May I? I'm going to put you on hold for one moment, okay?
Just to recap, if you're just joining us, you're looking at dramatic pictures of New York's World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, where a short time ago we are told that a plane crashed into the upper floors of the westernmost tower. You can see a gaping hole. That is on the north side of the building, and you can see residual damage on the west side of that building, and obviously fires are burning right now in the World Trade Center.
Tall buildings have had a real problem here in New York. There was, back in the 40s, a plane hit the Empire State Building. In the 60s, a helicopter crashed on the top of what was the Pan Am building, now the MetLife building. So
right now we're getting information, Al, that it was a small commuter plane, and of course we'll let people know as soon as we have more information as to what actually caused this, and of course on everybody's mind who might have been hurt as a result of this terrible, terrible incident. We're going to be talking to more eyewitnesses coming up in just a few minutes.
We are back at 9 o'clock Eastern Time on this Tuesday morning, and we're back with dramatic pictures of an accident that has happened just a short time ago. You're looking at the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, where just a few minutes ago we're told that a plane, some reports are that it was a small commuter plane, crashed into the upper floors of one of the Twin Towers. You can see fire and flames or smoke billowing from that tower. There is a gaping hole on the north side of the building. That's the side you're seeing to the left-hand side of your screen right now, and other damage to the west side of that building, which is to the right side of your screen. This, of course, happened just before the morning commute, before people were heading into their offices, and while I'm sure some people were already at work, immediately there's speculation or cause for concern. This is the World Trade Center that was the center of a terrorist bombing some years ago. So the questions have to be asked, was this purely an accident, or could this have been an intentional act? But either way, extensive damage has been done to this building.
it also looks like there's smoke coming out of the east side of the building. In that shot we just saw, it looks like white smoke billowing out the side of the east side of the building.
Obviously, horrified commuters were absolutely devastated when they heard this explosion. We talked with somebody a moment ago about that, Jennifer Oberstein, and also another eyewitness, Elliot Walker, who is actually a producer here on the Today Show. Elliot, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Katie.
Hi, Elliot. Tell me where you are and what you saw.
Well, I live in this area. I've returned to my apartment, but I was walking down the sidewalk delivering my young daughter to school, and we heard a very loud sound, the kind of sound you hear when a plane is going fast past you, followed by an enormous crash and an immediate explosion. I don't think we could feel shockwaves, but we sort of felt like we did. And we were in a position where we could see the Trade Center almost immediately between the other buildings. And an enormous fireball that must have been 300 feet across was visible immediately. A secondary explosion, I think, and then plumes of smoke. There must have been a 3-block cloud of white smoke. Now, from where I was on the street a moment ago, you can, in fact, see smoke leaving the building on 3 sides. It seems to be coming out on at least 4 or 5 floors. The air is filled with hundreds of thousands of pieces of paper that are just sort of floating like confetti. The area is swarmed with emergency vehicles and sirens. Obviously, we're very sensitive to this kind of thing in this neighborhood.
Elliot, have you, of course, because of the incident that occurred in the early 1990s, have you seen any evidence, Elliot, of people being taken out of the building? You say that emergency vehicles are there, understandably so, but of course the major concern is human loss. I mean, do you know if there were many people in the building?
Oh, another one just hit. Something else just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building, and there's been another collision. Can you see it? I can see it on this shot.
Oh, my.
Something else has
You know what? We just saw a plane circling the
747.
building.
It is in the other building.
We just saw a plane circling the building a second ago on the shot right before
I
that.
think there may have been another impact. Can you tell? I just heard another very loud bang and a very large plane that might have been DC-9 or a 747 just flew past my window, and I think it may have hit the Trade Center again.
To be honest, Elliot, I didn't get the impression that it was that big a plane.
It looks big from here.
I did see a plane go by a second ago, though, and it has now impacted the building. I'm trying to see if it's the different tower.
I think it may have been. I believe
tower.
the first one was World Trade Center 1, and it looks, from what I'm seeing on the television, like it may have been
We're
the
going to
second
see,
building.
this is a piece of tape, and we may actually see another plane enter the picture here in a second.
I wonder if there are air traffic control problems.
Let's go back to Jennifer Oberstein, who was talking to a second ago. Jennifer, did you see this happen?
Hello?
Did you just see this happen, Jennifer?
Matt, I've never seen any. It looks like a movie. I saw a large plane, like a jet, go immediately headed directly into the World Trade Center. It just flew into it, into the other tower, coming from south to north. I watched the plane fly into the World Trade Center. It was a jet. It was a very large plane. It was going fast. It went past the Ritz-Carlton Hotel that's being built in Battery Park. It flew right past it, almost hit it, and then went in.
This is so shocking, of course, to everybody watching.
I've never seen anything like it. It literally flew itself into World Trade Center.
Obviously now we move from what appears to have, there it is right there.
Again, I'm looking from south to north, and it went into the one on the right.
That appeared to be at least a 727. We saw it a second ago. Here comes the videotape that we just showed you. You will see what appears to be a large plane. It could be a 727 right there, maybe even bigger, flying right into the side of the World Trade Center.
It was at least a 727. It was a jet. I couldn't believe my eyes watching it right above me.
And now you have to move from talk about a possible accident to talk about something deliberate that has happened here. We're going to immediately check with air traffic control in the area to find out if they had contact with either of these planes before the accident. But what we've just seen is about the most shocking videotape I've ever seen.
What are the odds of two separate planes hitting both towers?
Elliot, are you still there?
Hello?
Elliot?
Yes, I'm still here, Katie.
So, Elliot, what can you see right now from your perspective?
I don't face in that direction. I can't see anything personally.
It is completely impossible to understand why this is happening and to figure out what in the world is going on.
I think we have to be grateful
Ali
that the first
Eberhard
plane hit before 9 a.m., but it's now after 9 a.m., and I just wonder how many people were
A lot
in
of
those
those
offices.
buildings fill
Well,
up.
hopefully that they were evacuated following the first incident, and we can only hope that there was a very short period of time from when we first learned about this was probably about 8:50 Eastern Time. This second incident occurred about 9:05, and so obviously that would be a short amount of time to get people out of the building. Ali Eberhard is another witness who is on the ground. Ali, can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Please tell me what you're seeing.
Well, I live in Lower Manhattan. I face the north tower, the north side where the first plane crashed into the building. And right now, there's a lot of chaos on the ground, a lot of emergency vehicles. Everyone from the World Financial Center has exited and is walking north up to Battery Park North. There's just mass and mass of people walking north uptown of Manhattan. I happened to look on the first tower, and I actually saw people waving where the first plane crashed through, and then it was unbelievable seeing this second jet come crashing into the second tower. What is going on?
And unfortunately, here in New York, many of our stations cannot see this, local stations, because the antennas are on the World Trade Center. They're backup towers on the Empire State Building, but communication, television communication in New York City is probably pretty much knocked off the air.
I just want to say something. We're looking at a picture here where it appears, because of the angle, I think, that the towers are leaning, and I don't think that is actually the case, because after the first impact, it looked as if it was the right-hand tower was leaning, and now somebody is saying, we're getting a witness saying they are leaning actually right now, which will give you an idea of the type of impact we're talking about.
And that perhaps they're buckling under the force of the collision or the hole that's resulted from these two planes.
We're going to go to George Shea right now, who has also witnessed both or one of these collisions. George, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
What did you see, George?
Yeah, well, I was in a car driving up, just gotten out of the Battery Tunnel and driving north on West Street when an enormous explosion happened. And it was larger than a construction explosion. I looked out the window, and what appeared to be an enormous tire smashed into the ground, and I believe it hit the car to the right of me, and it was just so scary, and there was also a ton of debris fall. And I jumped out of the car and I ran south away from the building because I thought there would be further explosions.
And have you seen anyone injured on the ground, George?
A man next to me was actually hit by a piece of debris in his arm, and they said that someone had been badly hurt in a car ahead of me. I'm not certain if it was the car next to me, and I can't verify that. All I can say is that a lot of debris was falling. It was very confusing because everybody, I think, immediately assumed that a bomb had exploded, and that sort of had people thinking that further bombs may explode. So there was sort of a rush away.
Did you see, George, the second plane, that jet, fly into the other Twin Tower?
I heard two explosions, however. There was a first explosion that was louder, and then a second explosion, and but I could not see that, and I looked up, and when I looked up, I saw debris falling, and the tire, as I said, a very large tire.
Well, of course, this is, as we've said, completely shocking video and a shocking turn of events, and we've been talking here that the first incident, one might surmise that it was some kind of accident, and then to have a second, what appeared to be 727 jet, of course, the question of terrorist activity has to surface, and the question of whether this was an intentional terrorist act of some kind.
You know, keep in mind that we're in an area here where there are three major airports. You have Newark Airport, Kennedy Airport, and LaGuardia Airport, all within several miles of the World Trade Center. You know, it's very unusual for a plane to get into this area without being completely tracked or identified by air traffic control. So you would have to imagine that, A, if this plane were headed right for the World Trade Center, there must have been someone trying to talk or communicate with that pilot, and for it to fly right into the side of the building.
Well, the smaller plane you can understand almost, but a jumbo jet, a large jet, completely.
Let's re-rack that video, if we could, down in the control room where we actually saw the jet flying into the building,
and
which
I was mistaken.
Unbelievable.
When Elliot Walker said it was a big plane, I was looking in the distance and saw a small plane, which might have been a helicopter, actually. To see this plane come into the picture,
there it is.
That is a big plane. And I mean, it's hard to imagine. It's a 737, we're now being told, and flying directly into the midsection of what would be the eastern tower of the World Trade Center.
I'm wondering if Jennifer Oberstein is still on the phone. Do we still have Jennifer on the phone? She's actually not on the phone because she was near a police officer. At least we could have perhaps gotten more information from that officer. Needless to say, it's pandemonium, I am sure, down there, and we gathered that from even the eyewitnesses with whom we spoke, and how terrifying this was for them to see. And you can only imagine, as you get closer to the Twin Towers, a New York landmark, what the scene must be like there.
You know, you talked about the buildings looking like they're buckled. They're designed to have a 2-degree sway in either direction because of the height of the building and to be able to deal with wind and stress. But something like that is more than it's probably designed for.
We want to go now out to Jane Daranowski, who I understand is a television producer here in New York. Jane, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm down here near the World Trade Center. I was walking down 6th Avenue this morning at 8:42 a.m. A group of us saw a plane veer through the buildings. Then we saw a huge cloud of smoke, and then fire came out of one of the towers. Here, it's near the upper floor, as you can probably see with your chopper shots. And then about 10 minutes ago, a second explosion in the second tower. Lower down, that was not affected by the plane, so I'm not quite sure what happened there. But right now there's a huge gaping hole in one of the towers, and the other building is on fire. The scene down here is incredible. People are out of their office buildings, watching, crying, taking pictures. I've never seen anything like it down here.
Jane, you said you saw the first plane. Did you get a glimpse of what kind of plane that was? We were told it was a small commuter plane.
Well, it wasn't a Cessna or anything like that. It was a larger plane, a mid-sized plane, and we could hear it very low. And walking down the street, a couple of us looked at each other, thinking, what's happening? Then it veered drastically on its side through the buildings and then went into the upper floors of the World Trade Center tower.
And we want to just mention that when the impact hit the first tower, you would hope that people who were in the second tower were beginning to evacuate, especially if air traffic control had some indication that this was deliberate. You'd hope that they were starting to get people out of the other tower before this second plane hit that tower.
But if you tried to go up, we've been upstairs in the towers of in the restaurant up there to try to get down.
I mean, the elevators would have been jammed, no question, but if there was an indication that this was deliberate in the first case, you'd hope that they would immediately begin evacuation in the second tower.
We've got another eyewitness that we'd like to speak with. Dan Dietrich is on the phone. Dan, tell me where you are and what you're seeing or what you saw.
Okay, what I saw was one plane coming in low from the north down over 7th Avenue. It crashed into the top or the middle of one of the towers. 10 minutes later, I saw another plane crash into the other side of the tower at a lower level. It looked to me a small, commercial plane, the first plane that I saw. It crashed into the top of the tower, and there was a huge fireball, and there was a gaping hole in the side of the tower. As we were waiting outside and looking at it, another plane came in low, I believe from the other side, and hit the middle of the other tower. So I saw both planes, two separate planes, crash into each tower.
And Dan, and again, the size of the planes, tell me about that.
I would say that the plane was a mid-size, looked to be a commercial airline. I don't know. I thought perhaps, a commercial airline, a mid-size, not a jumbo jet.
This, of course, is unconfirmed, but we are getting information from an employee of United Airlines. And again, we want to emphasize this is unconfirmed, but there is speculation that an American Airlines plane was hijacked and crashed on purpose into the World Trade Center, and that the second plane was another plane, perhaps hijacked, was then flown in to the second tower. Dan, tell me about people on the ground. Are you at a vantage point where you can see what's happening on the ground?
I'm farther up in the West Village. I'm not on the ground near the base of the towers.
Where were you when it actually happened?
I was walking down 7th Avenue south at about Charles Street, which is about 15 or 20 blocks north of the towers.
Well, obviously, this was a shocking thing for you to witness on this Tuesday morning, where some wires just came out and said in 1945, an Army Air Corps B-25, a twin-engine bomber, crashed into the 79th floor of the Empire State Building. That occurred in dense fog. This was a crystal clear day in Manhattan, so it is completely unclear how there would be any kind of problems with visibility. Dan, thank you so much for talking with us. Hopefully you can stay on the phone and we can check back in with you at another point in time. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We want to also remind people that the World Trade Center bombing that took place on February 26th back in 1993, the product of a terrorist attack, the result of a terrorist attack that killed 6 people and injured more than 1,000. Of course, that happened on a Friday afternoon. I think, Matt, you and Al were working that day.
We were.
I know I was at home in Virginia watching it in disbelief, and now it feels a bit like deja vu. But, of course, this is so much more bizarre.
Yeah, no question. And you keep in mind that killed 6 people, injured 1,000, and the explosion happened in a garage in the basement. This was a direct hit on the midsection or upper section of the tower, so the potential for injuries and death much larger. Of course, also some people on the planes.
Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. If they were hijacked and they were en route to a different destination,
right.
Of course, this story continues to unfold. Bob Kerr joins us now. Bob, where are you and what can you tell us?
Katie, good morning. I'm on the north lawn at the White House, and the first thing we look for here in light of what's happened is whether there is any unusual activity out here, whether there's an unusual police or Secret Service presence, people on the roof, that sort of thing. We don't see that as we speak. I did try to call the National Security Office here. As you know, the president is out of town. He is in Florida. We're told he has been informed of this. I can tell you that the White House National Security staff that remains here is in a senior level meeting, and we're hoping to hear from them as soon as possible. But Katie, the reaction here to the pictures you're seeing and to the initial pictures when they came up, even in what's called the lower press office here at the White House, was one of shock. I mean, people are just standing around television monitors looking at this. And when I say people, I don't mean just the reporters. I mean the people who are actually in the office who work here at the White House.
So very little information is coming out of the White House at this juncture, but needless to say, if the speculation is true about some kind of terrorist event, this will be a major, major crisis for the Bush administration. Jim Miklashevsky is at the Pentagon now. Mick, are you hearing any more information from there?
Well, according to U.S. intelligence officials, Katie, there appeared, at least to their knowledge, to be no specific threat involving hijacking airliners or any attacks on buildings in the New York area. U.S. intelligence officials report this morning that there are, they constantly are hearing about threats, possible terrorist threats against American targets worldwide. But as far as they know this morning, they had no early indications that anything of this nature could have occurred. Pentagon officials are already calling this a terrorist attack. They say that they have not yet ordered the scrambling of any military jets. If National Guard were to be scrambled in that area, that would be at the order of the governor. Now, of course, the president does have the authority to scramble American military forces in defense, but there's a problem here. What now do you defend against exactly? If you put warplanes in the air, there's always a danger that they could misidentify a pilot's intention.
Susan?
Although I believe, according to officials here,
I just wanted to tell you guys, if you want to
continue, are now off limits and restricted. But so far, the U.S. military and Pentagon officials are scrambling to get as much information as they possibly can to determine what course of action, if any, the U.S. military would take.
But, Mick, they are describing this as a terrorist attack right now.
There are some officials here in the Pentagon who are calling this an obvious terrorist attack based on very preliminary information. The information that intelligence officials are getting in terms of a possible hijacked plane, and, of course, the very horrifying video of the plane veering into the tower itself is a clear indication to everyone here that this is not an accident.
All right, Jim Miklashevsky, thanks. And, of course, the coordination that took place to have two planes hit the towers within 18 minutes of one another. Let's go back to the White House now. Bob Kerr is still standing by there. Bob, what can you tell us?
Well, Matt, it was interesting to listen to Jim Miklashevsky there from the Pentagon. Of course, the president has the authority to scramble military forces, and this is a case, obviously, in which retaliation, if indeed it proves to be a terrorist incident, will be contemplated. But the usual course of events is it's an investigation. You know, unless someone steps forward, claims responsibility, the White House and other arms of the U.S. government will say, we have to determine who is responsible for this attack, try to pinpoint it, and then the U.S. usually says someone is going to be made to pay. But that is a big if we can determine exactly the origin of this terrorist attack. And so there are some implications to that.
Let's go back to Jim Miklashevsky. Bob, thank you, at the Pentagon. Mick, you have more information?
Well, Katie, Bob's exactly right, but what their primary concern right now is protecting the American public in the New York area right now against any possible further attacks by the air. They have no indications there will be, but there is some concern that since this appeared to be such a highly coordinated attack, that there may be other terrorist attacks that could be planned either in New York or elsewhere. This is absolutely the worst case scenario for the counter-terrorist planners because apparently, according to intelligence officials, there were no firm indications prior to this that anything like this could have happened. But in terms of scrambling the U.S. military, it would be for protection for the time being and not necessarily even thinking right now about any kind of retaliation.
All right, David Gregory is now on the phone from Longboat Key, actually, where
he's following the president.
That's right. David?
Yes, Katie, the president is about to begin an education event, which is obviously being canceled. The event will go forward insofar as the president, we expect momentarily, will come out and make a statement about this. He was made aware en route from his hotel to this school here in Sarasota where he was going to talk about education. He'll make a statement, then we're told by White House officials that he will quickly depart for Washington.
We should mention, David, that New York City Airport or New York area airports have all been closed. The Lincoln Tunnel has been closed here in New York. While we're getting ready to listen to the president, let's go back to Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon. Jim, you talk about counter-terrorist measures that are in place. Can you shed any light for us on what kind of things are in place in the event of an attack of this nature?
Well, Katie, it's very difficult for the U.S. military to respond to this kind of thing right now because it's unclear exactly who's behind it and if there are any other potential attacks or incidents like this, because this has obviously not been officially declared a terrorist attack. But all the experts who are looking at these pictures say there's no doubt about it. This was a coordinated terrorist attack. But who and why is very much unclear right now. And the problem with trying to then put planes in the air to try to prevent any further attacks is these are, after all, open airspaces for the most part. And it's difficult for the U.S. military to simply scramble jets and put them in the air. And then, according to officials here, then do what? This area, of course, according to officials here, is obviously going to be declared off limits in terms of any air traffic. But right now, officials here at the Pentagon are simply scrambling to find out first what happened and what potential reaction the U.S. military could provide in terms of protection. Possible further protection against any further potential attacks.
And, Mick, it's important to note that if these planes were hijacked, if they were carrying passengers, there isn't much that military officials could have done. You can't shoot down a plane like that for risk of the people on board, plus for the injuries you could cause on the ground in a place like Manhattan. Go ahead.
That's exactly right. And the president, as we said earlier, does in fact have the authority to scramble the military to put them up in some kind of force protection mode. The governor has the Air National Guard at his disposal. He can do that. But again, officials are pretty much wondering exactly what to do in terms of protection and how. Again, to the terrorist officials, this is absolutely the worst case scenario because there right now seems to be not much they can do in terms of the aftermath.
Mick, obviously, yeah, we're scrambling for information here. I would just want to read this Reuters wire that says 2 planes crashed into the towers of the World Trade Center on Tuesday morning, causing huge explosions and killing at least 6 people. CNBC TV said there were at least 1,000 injured. Both towers of the Lower Manhattan landmark, where thousands of people work, were the scenes of a bombing in 1993. The FBI told the Associated Press that it was, quote, foul play and not an accident. A person who answered the phone, that was reported by ABC, a person who answered the phone on the trading floor at interdealer broker Cantor Fitzgerald, located near the top of the World Trade Center, said, "We're blanking dying," when asked what was happening, and hung up. There was screaming and yelling in the background, and a follow-up call was not answered. Nick Fulton, an eyewitness, said just before the first explosion he saw a plane fly over his apartment in the Soho district of Lower Manhattan. Jamie Gangel is on the telephone, our national correspondent, with more information. Jamie, what can you tell us?
Katie, I've just spoken to top U.S. officials with the access to latest intelligence, and they said, quote, that this was clearly terrorist-related, no question about it. They said that they couldn't give any further details now, not because they didn't want to share it, but because they just don't know yet. They're at the earliest stages.
So do they know, Jamie, if a plane was in fact hijacked?
They would not answer that, and I think that it's because I think that they just are getting the earliest details and they're afraid of putting out misinformation. But they said, that it was clearly terrorist-related.
All right, Jamie, thanks. We're looking again, if you're just joining us, at both towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, where two planes have crashed into the towers, one shortly before 9 o'clock Eastern Time, one shortly after 9 o'clock Eastern Time. And as you can see, the tower on the left was hit just above the midsection point. They're both 110 floors high, 1,300 feet above the ground. The tower on the right was hit more, probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up the tower, but you can see fires burning in both towers. We actually saw a videotape we watched the second tape, or the second plane hit the building. You'll watch it enter from the right portion of the screen and then make contact with the left-hand tower in what is shocking video. And here it comes right there. And you can see the impact on one side of the building and the residual damage coming out of another side of the building. And one can only imagine that that one occurred shortly after 9 o'clock in the morning. How many people were in the building at the time of the impact? And it's a large plane. We're told it was either a 737. Some reports that the first plane was a 757.
Some kind of Airbus. That was what the United worker told us. That apparently that it was an American Airlines plane that had been hijacked from Boston to Los Angeles, but we're just getting initial reports of that. And again, we must tell you that we're trying to get as much information, but it is trickling in at a very slow pace. So all of this is unconfirmed, and of course speculation of a terrorist attack is unconfirmed, although that is what some Pentagon officials are saying. Let's go to President Bush right now.
Unfortunately, we'll be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary Rod Page and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today, we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
No. That, of course, was President Bush, who is in Florida, in Longboat Key. He was speaking at an elementary school. He had planned to be talking about literacy. Obviously, he had to change. He mentioned that this is an apparent terrorist attack. He is traveling back to Washington. He said that he had spoken to the governor of New York as well as the vice president, that all the resources will be brought to bear by the federal government to determine who did this and who was responsible for this terrible, terrible event. And then, of course, it was followed by a moment of silence for the victims.
We're going to go to Andrea Mitchell now, who has more information on this tragedy. Andrea?
Matt and Katie, I've spoken to a top U.S. official who says that early reports to our intelligence community and to other officials within the administration are that this was a hijacked American Airlines plane en route from Boston to Los Angeles. One of the two planes, they say, was apparently a hijacked American Airlines plane. They caution that early reports still need further confirmation, but this is at least what the U.S. government is being told by American Airlines officials, apparently. They are assuming and have obviously informed the president that this is a terror attack.
And Andrea, we have no information as to in what term of the flight this plane was taken over, how much warning that air traffic controllers may have had that someone hostile was at the controls of this plane?
Exactly right. They had no other information, just that at least one of the two planes was hijacked from Boston en route to Los Angeles, presumably after it had already been in the air and en route, because I was told en route to Los Angeles. So probably hijacked after it had taken off. As you know, those are very short flights. Those are usually 737s or 757s on that route. But this clearly, according to the U.S. government, is a terror attack, as you heard the president say. Now, one of the things, Matt and Katie, we should understand is that there was no specific threat that the U.S. government is aware of. No specific terror alert other than the worldwide caution that had been reissued in recent days because of the strife in the Middle East, because of concerns over terrorists. Of course, the best known is Osama bin Laden, but no alert coming from his organization. And as far as they know, as of this morning, as of this minute, he is in Afghanistan.
But as we should mention, Andrea, it appears that this was a well-coordinated bombing or terrorist act because of the fact that two planes were used, both substantial in size, and the fact that they both hit the World Trade Center within 18 minutes of one another. Obviously, a lot of planning went into this attack. Let's go to NBC's Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon now. Mick, what can you tell us?
Matt, to add to what Andrea Mitchell just said, senior military officials here at the Pentagon are saying they are getting information that the American Airlines Flight 11, after it left Boston apparently, was hijacked and was diverted, apparently the early information was being diverted to JFK for some reason. And then obviously nobody knows exactly who was at the controls of the plane, but it broke off its route from to Los Angeles and was headed toward JFK. That was the initial information that officials had received when obviously it did not go to JFK, but veered off and headed toward the World Trade Center. But again, no indication as to who may be responsible or who was at the controls of that plane when it rammed into the World Trade Center. Matt.
Mick, thank you. We're going to be obviously talking with you throughout the morning, but right now we want to talk with Larry Johnson, a terrorism expert, in fact, the former Deputy Director of the State Department's Office on Counterterrorism. Mr. Johnson, can you please put this into some kind of perspective for us and give us your insight on what might have happened here?
Well, first we need to be cautious before jumping to the conclusion that it's necessarily terrorism. I mean, I would be inclined, based upon the preliminary reports we've seen, to say that that's the case. But there's always the possibility that you may find out after the fact that this was some suicide pact for some reason that had nothing to do with politics. That said, this is a first. Back in 1992, there was 93, there was a Lufthansa plane hijacked from Germany, and it ended up landing in New York. And one of the concerns we had at that time was the possibility of that plane, under the control of a hijacker, flying it into one of the buildings. My concern now is that there's always we ignore terrorism. We talk a lot about it, but we ignore taking very practical steps on security fronts until something like this happens. And then the pendulum swings out to an extreme. The next thing you hear are people talking about putting surface-to-air missiles on top of buildings to prevent this kind of thing. This is a very rare event. It's unlikely to be repeated, but, and I think President Bush put his finger on it, we have to find who did this, and any country, any nation in the world that is in any way involved and responsible, if it turns out to be terrorism, will require a response from the United States, and the United States has got to be willing to pay that price.
Mr. Johnson, obviously we're completely stunned when about 25 minutes after the first explosion or after the first plane crashed into one of the Twin Towers, another very large plane did the same thing. Right. And we've been talking with our correspondents all morning about sort of if another incident could happen on the heels of these two. What kind of measures are in place to prepare for something else that could conceivably happen?
Well, I think one of the steps that's already being taken, I was at National Airport getting ready to fly to LaGuardia when this occurred. They have shut down air traffic going in and out of the cities. Now, apart from shutting down the air traffic, you're talking about an enormous disruption economically for the nation right now with the air traffic not going in, and people are going to err on the side of caution. I think across the board, you're going to look at the major hubs in the United States where there are large buildings: Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles, and there are going to be extra measures taken. One possibility is you could start putting up air cover and require that planes stay within a particular area and do not approach any closer. And if they if they approach, you would go to the extremes of having the U.S. Air Force intercept.
Larry, I wanted to ask you, all morning that correspondents have also been saying, particularly Bob Kerr and Jim Miklashevsky, that there was and Andrea Mitchell, no warning attached to this event. Right. Generally speaking, do we get some kind of, do U.S. officials, government agencies get some kind of warning from a particular group, or is this pretty, fairly typical in terms of an event happening without any foreshadowing?
No, Katie, this unfortunately is typical. It's only in the movies that you get the advanced warnings. You look at every major terrorist incident against the United States, whether you're talking Pan Am 103, the World Trade Center, the USS Cole bombing, the bombing in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
Rarely do you get an advance notice.
Larry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Jim Miklashevsky has some new information at the Pentagon. I hope you'll stand by and continue to talk with us. Mick?
Katie, I don't want to alarm anybody right now, but apparently it felt just a few moments ago like there was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon. We're on the E-ring of the Pentagon. We have a window that faces out toward the Potomac, toward the Kennedy Center. We haven't been able to see or hear anything after the initial blast. I just stepped out in the hallway. Security guards were herding people out of the building, and I saw just a moment ago as I looked outside, a number of construction workers who have been working here have taken flight. They're running as far away from the building as they can right now. I hear no sirens going off in the building. I see no smoke, but the building shook for just a couple of seconds. The windows rattled, and security personnel are doing what they can momentarily to clear this part of the building. Again, I have no idea whether it was part of the construction work, whether it was an accident, or what is going on. We're going to try to find those details and get them to you as soon as possible. But interestingly enough, one intelligence official here in the building said when he saw what appeared to be the coordinated attack on the World Trade Center, his advice was to stay away from the outside of the building today, just in case. Now, again, nobody has any indications of exactly what happened, but it appears that there has been some kind of, it felt like a small blast of some kind. Again, the window shook, the building shook, the windows rattled, and people, if I'm looking out the window now, and the construction workers are still keeping a good, the construction workers are still keeping a distance. That's all I can see, and I see no other extracurricular security activity right outside. But to get more information, I'm going to have to break away and walk down the hallway and see what it is exactly that happened here just a few moments ago.
Mick, see what you can find out. Please be careful and let us know what's going on there. Meanwhile, we're going to go back to David Gregory, who is in Longboat Key, Florida, where President Bush was earlier this morning for an event on literacy. He was going to a school to talk with kids. David, what can you tell us?
A little bit more about how all of this unfolded and what the president is going to do next. The president declared this an apparent terrorist act. He offered a prayer for the families, promised to hunt down, in his words, the people responsible for this. He will now travel back to Washington, and aides are telling us now that he will immediately convene a national security meeting to see what steps are taken next.
David, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're looking at live pictures of the Pentagon where there is billowing smoke. Jim Miklashevsky just reported that he heard an explosion, and right now we're looking at an aerial view of the Pentagon. Mick, can you talk to us?
Officially, nobody knows exactly what happened. I think the picture is pretty clear. According to one U.S. Army officer who went running past me at a full trot, he said that it appears that a bomb was detonated at the heliport. The heliport is a helicopter landing area right next to the Pentagon, just adjacent to the E-ring. The offices nearest the heliport area are U.S. Army, Reserve officers, and the Army Reserve our offices are located there. But as you can see, it appears to be a pretty significant blast. To give you some perspective, We are almost on the opposite side of the building, the world's largest office building. And as I reported to you, we could feel the building shake and the windows rattle. And as I was in the hallway just a few moments ago, I could smell an acrid kind of smoke, the kind of almost what you'd smell when a fluorescent light goes bad, that kind of ballast smell. And authorities are clearing the building. I don't know if you can hear the sirens outside right now, but it appears that in what I think people here in the building are already describing as a highly sophisticated, coordinated attack, not only against the World Trade Center, but against the Pentagon and U.S. military right here in Washington.
Tell me again, I worked at the Pentagon as well, and it is a huge building. I mean, it's miles and miles of offices. At what location did this seem to have detonated?
It's at the heliport. The heliport, which is as you sit in the Pentagon, you have the Potomac River and Washington, D.C. on one side, and the heliport is located almost exactly on the opposite side of the building, along one of the highways, easily accessible, even though that they've increased security here significantly at the Pentagon within the past couple of years. That area.
I want to mention to you, Mick, that we are hearing, again, unconfirmed reports that this was the result of a plane crashing in the area as well.
I have no idea, Katie. All I know is that people who were in the building who came running from that part of the building thought it was a bomb of some kind. According to Chris Brown, my colleague who just came in, it appears that whatever it was, and perhaps it was a plane, Katie, if those are the initial reports, crashed into, or the damage is on the roof of the building at the heliport side of the Pentagon, which is just opposite of the Potomac River, as I just said.
We're looking at the White House, Mick, because we are learning that there have been some evacuations from the White House. I'm assuming that everyone is being evacuated from the Pentagon?
Well, nobody's given us the official word yet, but I think that's probably a safe bet. Thank goodness that was a helicopter that just flew by. I'm just a little nervous right now when you hear aircraft go past. But they have, in fact, evacuated that portion of the building. Usually they have sirens that go off in the building alerting you to the fact that it's time to get out. I haven't heard those yet, but just judging by the pictures, it's clear that that part of the building that is not damaged, at least, has been evacuated. Like I said, in the hallway, it was pandemonium. People were rushing from their offices, rushing outside.
And you're in your office at the Pentagon right now, Mick, reporting to us?
I am in the office, but I'm at the opposite side of where this crash occurred.
All right. Why don't you see if you can gather some more information? Please, again, be careful, Mick. And we're going to go to Matt, who's going to be talking with Jamie Gangel.
All right. Yeah. Katie, thank you very much. I'm joined by Tom Brokaw, and we'll try and recap what's been going on all morning here on the East Coast and in Washington, D.C. in just a few moments. But we do want to go right now to NBC's or today's national correspondent, Jamie Gangel, with some more information. Jamie?
Matt, I just want to tell you that U.S. intelligence sources are confirming the reports that one of the planes was a hijacked flight, an American flight from Boston to Los Angeles. They are also now looking into what's going on at the Pentagon. They don't have any details, but they have now put government buildings around the city of Washington on a heightened state of alert. I think part of that is happening formally, but obviously people are seeing what's going on, and some people are leaving buildings as well simply because of the concern following these latest reports from the Pentagon.
All right, Jamie, thank you very much. Again, joined by Tom Brokaw, and Katie's back with us now, too. Let's try and recap. It's 9:47 Eastern Time. Try and recap what's going on so far this morning, and the news is terrible. Just before 9 o'clock.
At 8:42, actually.
8:42, a plane crashed into the right-hand tower of the World Trade Center, somewhat about three-quarters of the way up. You can see the smoke billowing from that point of the building. And then about 18 or 20 minutes later, a second plane, a large plane, we saw it actually on tape, hit the left-hand tower of the World Trade Center about halfway up. An enormous fireball on several sides of the building. People trying to be evacuated. There's the tape of the second plane hitting right there, even as people were trying to get out of the first building. We have confirmed reports now that there was one plane hijacked, American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles. And that is apparently one of the planes used in this crash, Tony.
Matt, there's a report on Dubai television that, in fact, the group claiming responsibility is the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. This comes, ironically, on a day when the Israeli Foreign Minister, Shimon Peres, is scheduled to meet with Yasser Arafat. Of course, we've had the meeting in South Africa for the past several days in which the Palestinians were accusing the Israelis of racism. The United States vacated that meeting, but there hasn't been one specific incident.
And the Israelis vacated that meeting
as well. And the Israelis vacated it as well, but there has not been one specific incident. It's also worth pointing out that terrorism also always has two prongs to it, the physical threat and now the psychological threat. This does seem to be surreal, but in fact it is real when you have an explosion of undetermined origin at the Pentagon, the most conspicuous symbol of American capitalism, the Twin Trade Towers here in New York, two deliberate attacks on those towers today, and we do not know for sure who is responsible.
And the Capitol, by the way, the U.S. Capitol has been evacuated. There have been evacuations taking place at the White House. Needless to say, many people in the Pentagon have left that building as well.
Airports and here, in New York. By the way, in this building in Midtown New York, they have asked a lot of people at 30 Rockefeller Plaza to leave. It's another high-rise Capitol building, which is... in New York, I came down the length of Manhattan, and a lot of people were simply unaware of what had happened as you tuned in the radio, and then they began to get it. It's election day here in New York.
Primary day.
And what we have is something that most Americans thought could never occur.
As Larry Johnson, a terrorist expert I just spoke with a few moments ago, the former deputy director of the State Department Office on Counterterrorism, claimed this is a first, that he had never heard or seen anything like it. He talked about back in 1993 a German plane being hijacked, and there were fears when it was flown to New York that it might be crashed into something.
Now, this is a major development. The Federal Aviation Administration has shut down all air traffic nationwide. This country has been immobilized by these terrorist attacks in terms of air travel today, and we don't know where it goes from here. We'll just ask that you stay with us so that as we get hard information, we can share that with you. There's going to be a lot of speculation. The president has described this apparently as a terrorist attack. The FBI has confirmed that an American Airlines flight, Boston to Los Angeles, was hijacked. It's believed that that was the first plane that went into the Twin Trade Towers.
Let's go to James Kallstrom, Tom, if we could, the former director of the FBI here in New York. Mr. Kallstrom, I'm sure you've never seen anything like this. Do you have any information that might be helpful to us?
Well, not particular information on this tragedy, but certainly what an incredible tragedy. And, all of us in law enforcement and prior in law enforcement have talked for years, and the public has seen the hatred in the world. They've seen the bombing of the World Trade Center. They saw the conspiracy to blow up the tunnels in the United Nations and the FBI building back in the 90s. They've seen the bomb at the USS Cole and the bombings of our embassies in Africa. So, I mean, we've known for some time now that this hatred exists, and now it looks like that it's culminated in this absolutely horrendous, incredible act against the United States.
Jim, as someone who's
Washington today.
I'm sorry, as someone who's investigated some of these crimes in the past, and when we think back to 1993 and the World Trade Center bombing and what it took in terms of coordination and planning to pull off that one bomb in the World Trade Center, can you even speculate as to what it might take to coordinate this, what we think so far is a three-pronged attack this morning?
Matt, it obviously took a lot of coordination. There's a lot of groups in the world that have the ability to coordinate these types of attacks. As you know, and most people should know, the United States is an open society. I mean, we've talked for years about the downside of having our borders basically open. And any given day, people fly into our airports undocumented and turned into the population. They're not certainly all terrorism. They're not terrorists, but I mean, we live in a free society, and I'm not espousing we change that. But it's very, very difficult for the FBI and law enforcement to keep track of this when we live in the society that we live in.
Jim, if you can stand by for just a moment, because Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon has some more information for us. Mick?
Katie, my colleague Chris Brown here at the Pentagon encountered some of those who survived, whatever it was, whether it was a bomb or an airplane crashing into the Pentagon. One of the survivors who was reportedly injured, had various lacerations, was on the second floor of the D ring. That is one ring inside the outer ring of the Pentagon, when suddenly there was this horrific blast. And he said that the second floor buckled upward, and then the third floor above him actually collapsed downward. The scene on the other side of the building, as it's being described to us, there are people being removed on stretchers. Security forces are evacuating the building right now. And according to the officials here at the Pentagon, they still don't know exactly what it was, but as you reported, Katie, eyewitnesses reported that, in fact, it was a plane that crashed into the Pentagon.
And Mick, any idea, I wasn't quite sure if you said this, about the number of people who might have been hurt or worse in this?
No idea at all, Katie. As you know, having worked here on any given day, this is a small city, 25 to 30,000 people may be working here at any one time. That portion of the Pentagon, by the way, had just been remodeled and just reopened. If the crash had occurred just a few months ago, that section of the Pentagon would have been virtually empty. But at this time of day, early morning or mid-morning, the Pentagon's very busy. It's impossible to say how many casualties there may be. But there have been a large number of people cited being removed on stretchers. And again, as one survivor said, the floor just buckled up under him and the roof caved in on him.
All right, Mick, thank you very much. We want to move a couple of miles away from you right now to the White House, where Bob Kerr is standing by. And Bob, we understand that building has now been evacuated?
Matt, that's true. It is utterly surreal. As soon as word came of the Pentagon incident, we were rather forcefully removed from the White House. The scene was one of administrators, cooks, whatever, running at fairly high speed all the way out of the building through the top gates. Then we huddled for a while in Lafayette Park across the street, and we've been moved now from there a block or so away. The offices along Jackson Place, which are across the street from the White House and adjacent to Lafayette Park, also have been evacuated. And in the most surreal of this morning's scenes here at the White House, a white plane, a very big jet, was flying an unusual pattern near the White House over Lafayette Park very slowly. It made one circle, and then we have not seen it since. There was a lot of concern about what that plane might be, but again, it's only speculation. But most people say that since flights have been cleared from U.S. airspace and it was a totally white plane, looked unusual to all of us, that it was a government plane of some kind.
We should point out that we're looking at pictures, Bob, as you speak, of the World Trade Center, because all of the camera crews have been evacuated from the White House as well. When do you expect President Bush to arrive there, Bob?
Well, Katie, he's coming back directly, and you figure it's about a 2-hour flight, so you can do the math. The reason I said that it was so surreal was that within just about 20 minutes ago, they were still conducting tours. You had hordes of tourists and others still in the White House on tour, lining up outside to get in. There seemed to be absolutely no unusual activity outside the White House until word came of the incident at the Pentagon. So it's been quite a dramatic shift here.
You know, in terms of responsibility, Tom and Matt and Bob, apparently a senior official from the Radical Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine denied on Tuesday the group had any connection to the plane crash. An anonymous caller had told television that it was behind the crash, but, quote, "I emphasize that the story released on television by an anonymous person is totally incorrect." Tassir Khaled, a senior official from the DFLP Politburo in the Palestinian territories, told Reuters. The DFLP is against hijacking planes and against endangering the lives of civilians who are not connected with the struggle of this region, he said.
There are going to be a lot of claims and counterclaims in the course of the next 24 hours or so. This is a task for investigators of extraordinary magnitude to try to determine who did this and how they got away with it. You think about an American Airlines flight that was on its way from Boston to Los Angeles, was hijacked in midair. They're now citing transmissions from the plane, so they have hard evidence of that, and then brought down here and made to fly into the Twin Trade Towers. Did one of the hijackers get control? Did they shoot the pilot? It boggles the mind beyond our ability to figure out what was going on.
You talk about transmissions. I was just curious. Have you had any evidence of what was said during those
They're just saying they're citing transmission to know that the plane had been hijacked. That's all that they're saying about it at this point. We also ought to remind everyone, once again, this is an exceptional development. The FAA has banned all takeoffs at all airports across America. This country, in terms of air travel, has been immobilized. A good portion of the nation's capital, the most powerful center in the world, has been immobilized as well as a result of these terrorist
And that's
attacks.
a very haunting description that Bob Kerr just gave of that low-flying aircraft near the White House, and one can only wonder if that was something that ultimately ended up in the Pentagon.
We just saw a live picture of what seemed to be a portion of the building falling away from the World Trade Center. If we can re-rack that to about 20 seconds ago, you'll see something dramatic happening, and I don't know whether it's another explosion or a portion of the building falling away, but something major just happened at that building. Here we go to the tape.
We have the tape.
And watch what happens in the left-hand tower. I don't know if this is the correct tape. There, something there is about to happen, falling away right there.
Yeah, it looks like a big chunk of it has just peeled away.
One can only hope that the area has been evacuated, but of course you wonder about